meeting of the lecture series, and today we are delighted to have here with us Professor Xinyan Jiang. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
So Professor Jiang, she initially studied philosophy at the Peking University and then got her PhD at the University of Cincinnati. And she's currently, after also having taught philosophy at Peking University, she's professor of professor of philosophy at the University of the Redlands. She is trained in both Chinese philosophy and Western philosophy. She's the author of monographies, but also of edited books, of course, book chapters and several journal articles. And her research areas cover Chinese philosophy, comparative philosophy, ethics, and feminism. So welcome, Professor Jiang. The floor is yours.
Thank you for your introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here today, and I'm really glad and I'm offered this opportunity to exchange idea with you. And actually the topic I'm doing right now is also pretty new for me, so I really want to hear from other people. So I'm really for recent years working on the contemporary Chinese philosophy. Kang Youwei is somebody come across. When I read the Da Tong Shu, his work, and suddenly realized this topic about subject of women or sexual equality. And so that's today's topic. So I'm going to basically give my presentation based on my reading of his work, Book of Great Unity in Chinese Da Tong Shu. So there are not much secondary literature on the topic as far as I know. And so when I read his the volume on the women in Da Tong Shu, his Great Unity, and I was really impressed with his scholarship, with his idea, and about women's liberation, oppression, and maybe many of you are kind of imagine. And before that, I thought he was kind of conservative in some way because of his during his time and against revolution. But more I read, I realized how valuable and his work is on subject of women. Definitely for his political idea, and the more I studied about his philosophy, I realized, and the more about it's not as conservative as I thought. And he never changed his idea about value of democracy, liberty, equality. And it's just he greatly disagreed with the revolutionary about which stage of Chinese society is. So he's one who support constitutional monarchy. And then for women issue, then on the one hand, he's very radical. I really feel there's so much I read and enjoy what he's saying there. At the same time, he is still a gradualist. He didn't believe revolution. He wants to say, and we had to go step by step, right? It's like his idea in a political issue there. So that's kind of how I start this project. So for myself, basically, I just kind of read a lot about his work and kind of get out the things I think the most valuable, most impressive, and kind of come up with my own a conclusion here. So what I conclude here, I really think he's kind of in the modern philosophy of China, and he is the most, the profound and the radical thinker in regard of the women's issue. And so he really is one who spoke of so much women's suffering, and he did much more than many others, and partly because he has that experience in personal experience with his family, his sister, his mom, and he knows like firsthand how much women suffered. And so that's partly where he's come from. And then I was like also doing research on John Stuart Mill. I published one book on that. So then I kind of somewhere the contrast with his idea and the Mill's idea found so much similarity. And then I just also see where is his different and where is his valuable. So then I kind of feel pity that he didn't publish his work, and during or immediately after May 4th new culture movement, it's kind of he didn't dare to publish as much. And his great unity suppose was finished at early 20th century, like 1902 or 3, but he didn't publish his most part, only published 2 chapters when he's still alive. And so the complete part of the book, including this chapter about women, published in the 1930s, right? So that's already after so many people in China criticized and sexism and women's oppression. But what Kang said actually is a lot very deep stuff. I think I agree with Xiao Gongquan in that aspect. He feel his critique of women's oppression in China and even more systematic, more profound than those philosophers and during the May 4th movement. I guess that's kind of background here. I just want to share first. So next, I'm going to share one of the PowerPoint with you and highlight what I'm going to say. So I'm going to divide my presentation into 3 parts. And the first part is about and Kang's analysis and the description of women's suffering, not only in China, also globally, but mainly in China. And the second part talk about his philosophical critique of women's oppression. And the last part is about his solution and the road to sexual equality. So let me just share my PowerPoint with you. If I go too fast, the slides, just let me know. And then I will still talk a lot about kind of PowerPoint will maybe highlight what I'm going to say here. So can everybody hear me clearly so far?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We don't see the sharing yet. Maybe you're not shared yet, right?
Yeah, I'm just in the process right now. So right now it's okay?
Yes.
Good, okay. So the first part, just I already sum up, it's kind of my conclusion here. And so it's my conclusion, giving him kind of why, like the high comments here, like the praise. And I just mentioned, I think the compare with many others in modern Chinese philosophy, he is one, I think, gets the best critique of women's subjection. So his work today is still valuable and remained relevant, especially to the women's liberation in a developing country, especially because many things he's talking about and maybe get a lot of improvement in the Western country, but still in many other countries, including in China, I think a long way to go. Also theoretically, I want to say, I did not argue that he is very original philosophically, speaking of the theory, and then he's combined liberalism, utilitarianism, and socialism all together. But he still should have a special place in the history of feminist philosophy because his way to talk about all the issue, especially his understanding of women's suffering in the non-West culture, especially in China. So that's just like the general speaking here. So right now I'm going to just go to a more specific point here. I want to go to some like very general issue there he mentioned. Then I'm going to like the speak more about where he I think he did better than other people. So the first, he talking about how much women are suffering. And I think it's important to listen to how he perceived the situation. And I think a lot of this still are kind of true in many countries, definitely to different degrees. And so he go to the critique in a way like he first say like this is the reality and how bad the situation is. So first he talk about political rights and women at his time, as when he wrote this book, it's late 19th century, early 20th century, he said that nowhere and women have the equal political rights as men, even in United States. Then today the situation is better, but go back to that time, that is true. And but even today, and in many places, political rights still is what women are struggling for. And we know they are the country and they don't give women political rights like voting right and equal opportunity to participate in the political affairs. And definitely not that is a universal phenomenon, but definitely I will say today in US, in many Western countries did like the almost like the politically, legally women have the equal political rights. And go back to that time and he really and look at the situation like women cannot vote, women cannot be the Congress person, women cannot take office. And in Chinese situation, even worse, right? So we know China has had that imperial exam system by which officials were selected, but women have no right to be there, right? Basically, women, especially in China and in many developing countries, they are stay home without going outside. Again here, and that get much better improved today. And legally, I will say today, and a lot of countries get this issue taken care of. But at his time, he was really sharp to talk of like everywhere this issue here. So that I just go to very general speaking, he talked about this issue. Also, he talked about women didn't have equal opportunity of education. That is also universal. And I will say in many, many countries today is still the case. And even legally in some places, women have the legal rights for education, but in reality, for example, family will let boy to go to school and let girl stay home to do the housework and do the work for the family, so on. So not a long time ago in China, just a few decades ago, we can still see that issue. Actually, there are times I read some data about, and the girl cannot go to school in many rural area. And so that's another issue he mentioned. And that is getting worse than this. And he was talking about, and women are treated as a servant, even slaves. And that again is universal, but in a Western country and to the much less degree. So servant he talking about women is like the person who's in charge of housework and serve the parents-in-law, serve the family member, and so on. Sometimes even treating worse than that. He go back to criticize the Chinese situation, like the girl wife, and the girl was sold to the family of her future husband. Then from a very young age, start working as the cheap labor, but serve the family of that whole family, and so on. That's all the phenomena, but it was a very bad situation for women. Remember when he wrote this, that's still alive in China. So he kind of realized women were treated badly universally, then especially in a poor country and in a non-Western country, they really serve as a servant at least. So I think this phenomenon is still there. And if you go to countryside, even today in China, and the wife or the daughter-in-law suppose is to serve other people. If they don't, they're not supposed to, not considered a good woman. So I think even like educated women in China, I remember like among my friends, and even we are all professional women, but we kind of have a burden to do more housework. we are afraid of people will not say you are good wife or daughter-in-law. How busy, no matter how busy you are, you have to rush to the kitchen to do a housework to show you are a woman, right? So that's like really, to a certain degree, today is much better, but it was much severe and at Kang Youwei's time. So he really catched that. And he also talk about women don't have freedom of person. That means you have no control of your own body. And so not only they don't have the freedom to go out for the place they want to go, and also they suffer some physical injury and imposed by the man for their own pleasure. So this one, again here, if you look globally today, we know some other countries, not here, not in China, and people are, the women not allowed to go out without man's permission, right? So in the time, and Kang Youwei wrote this, definitely for Chinese women, many of them can only allowed in the inner quarter, and without man's permission, they cannot go out, right? So for the physical injury, he really criticized some practice that damage women's body for man's pleasure. In the Chinese case, at that time, still have the foot bonding. So he criticized that a lot. And also when he wrote this, his part of a book on women, and in China, the foot bonding is not abolished. And so he kind of furiously criticized the practice, and also, and as a father, and he, like when his daughter are there, he insists none of his daughter will get foot bonded. And so back that time in China, if the women are not get foot bonded, maybe they couldn't find a husband, right? Suppose the small foot are beautiful, but it's damage women's kind of ability, make them kind of disabled. In a way, they cannot move, they cannot run, they cannot move very fast. So I remember my grandma, and when we go out together, I have to take a long time with her, even a very short distance, because her foot cannot walk very quickly. So for Kang Youwei, he think that is like physical penalty on women. It's like a criminal received, but women was going to damage so much. Then he talked about other practice in the West, for example, and make your breast so little and tight your body. And he thought at that time Western women do the same thing. So maybe he will talk about the high heel of the show, but I think he didn't mention that. But they're also about like in your face, there are a lot of stuff, and so make women really get hurt. So he criticized all of this practice and why women did that. And suppose that make a man feel beautiful. And so the man wants women to do that. And so get all of this, like the physical damage, just for man's pleasure, because women are treated as a property, as the toy of the man. And so I guess he get a lot, like really very good criticism there to see how bad the situation is, how like, and women were treated as like the not for human beings. And I guess these kind of things today, I will say still partially there. In some country, much more severe, in some country less. Definitely in China, foot bonding already abolished, but definitely there, and in the different practice, women physically and like suffer more than men because they want to make themselves like kind of beautiful in the eyes of men. So that's kind of also he criticized a lot about this. And lastly, he also talked about the moral code and caused great suffering of women. So this part I want to say a little more here. So it's not just physically women suffered, also like what supposed morally right. It's like the moral teaching and the moral code. And this is really, many of them in the society, in the existing society is really very sexist and double standard. Ask women to do what men don't, and also have a different criterion but women and men. For example, obedience is a virtue of woman, but it's not for man, right? Also, for man, go back to his time, man could have several, like the wife, concubines, and also man could have sex freely with other women, and for the woman they cannot. So they can basically get one man only, and if they have a second man, suppose they are bad women, right? So you will see this is not the case today. I will say this to great degree, at least in China, still is there double standard there, because and if women get married, divorced, then they get a harder time to get remarried, right? But men get divorced, very quickly get remarried, so no issue, because there are no issue about a man already with another woman, but for the women already with another man, that will be for some men even today, it feels very hard to accept. And what I like, what Kang Youwei did there is not just something like that, so general. And he really go to attack one of the very specific practice, and that lasts for 100 years in China. So let me just put that. And example, at his time, there still have this 好女不嫁二夫 the moral idea, like the supposed moral norm, the good woman does not marry two men, and that promote lifetime widowhood, and that led many women to extreme hardship, and even death. And so I didn't see other people's writing like the criticize this so personal, so like kind of emotional and powerful. So that I just want to say, he got a reputation about supporting Confucianism, right? And but what he really like when he look at this kind of practice, that this paper didn't like involved, but how much Confucian he is. But then he used the name of Confucius a lot, and even want to establish the Confucian as the national religion. But on the other hand, I feel like in his heart he is the liberal, and he want to like say what the liberal and people will say here. So he really criticized this practice, criticized this moral code, and think that he is the moral code, and make women suffer so much, and even the death. His mother is a widow. Two of his sisters were widow as well. And so he watched their life, and both of his sisters and husband died relatively young, and both of his sisters get into poverty, and also didn't live a long life because of that. So today, maybe you just wonder how that could be so severe, and ask women not to marry again, how that could be not only say not comfortable, also means and survive or not. And so actually Kang Youwei has a very detailed like explanation in his book of Great Unity on the volume on women. And when I read that, I really make a lot of like what I personally know in my family. And so he talked about why this moral code and make women suffer so much. And from the first-hand information he had. And so when the women and be the widow, husband died, at that time, when women have no economic resources, they are not supposed to work outside, right? So when a man died, they lost economic source financially. That's horrible. And also you wonder why family do not help. They don't. Why? Because number one, when the husband died, this woman and suppose no longer real member of the family of her husband, because husband is their family, but she no longer because husband died. So therefore the family of the husband will not help her usually. Then how about and the family of her own like parents' family? According to tradition, when the women get married, and they no longer belong to their original family. So therefore, their own family don't treat her as a member of their family. So like, I guess the old saying in China is like the women, when they get married, they are like the water already pour out, no longer belong to their family. So then you go to see how about the friends, and will friends of her will help her. And so they just go to the divide in a two way. And if they are the man and they want to help her, that is almost impossible, because suppose this woman cannot have any contact with other men, and also man be afraid of be accused to have anything to do with the woman other than his wife or somebody's widowed. How about a woman, female friends? The female friends, most time they don't have the power, they don't have resources, they cannot help her. So usually, how you will argue, and when the women get widowed, given this moral code, you don't have another man, and then they have to get poverty because they have no income, there's nobody help them, at least not so much possibility. And so either they struggled to survive and the poverty, extreme hardship, or they starving to die, starving to death. So that's really happened. He watched both of his sisters have a very bad ending there. And so I also can, like from my own family history, and I heard from my father a lot. So my grandma is one of this widow, and my grandpa died quite early at his 30. And so my grandma is like about somewhere like 20 or before 30. She had 5 children, and she received no help. And not only that, and she get bullied by the family member of her husband because she has no man here. So when the family have the property distribution, and she and her children get the worst part, the smallest land, worst land, that's what they get. So I guess the other side, people will see the confusion, China, so wonderful, family help each other. But in the reality, I think the Kang really understand reality, what it's like for women. And so I really heard the story about my grandma. And so my father tell me, and really why he didn't have much connection with like his aunts and uncles on his father's side, and how hard my grandma struggled. But she's a strong woman, she was smart, and she eventually raised 5 children up, and they did well. But I just couldn't imagine how hard that was. There's no help. My father tell me like so there are a little bit sometimes she get help from her own parents, it's not really parents, they go to her sister and sometimes borrow some food, or even just something for the pigs. And so if they can borrow a little bit, then they will not starving to death. So it's just it's kind of really like when I read Kang's description there, I kind of feel like he really understand what's going on in the traditional China, and how this kind of moral code not only like make women unhappy, and also could really make them even die. And so he really hated this, and see this kind of moral code for women such as this one, and really should like get rid of. And we really should look at women's suffering and get rid of this kind of morality, which is only cause suffering. So that's kind of part, like I feel like he is the one, don't have so much romantic idea about what the kind of traditional China is. It's kind of really know what's going on because he get experience with his own sisters. And so basically he's talking about, and in reality, women considered as private property of man, have no freedom and independence. And the women were so oppressed that many of them just exist as men's playthings, but not as a human with their own rights and dignity And right now, you maybe feel like he's like the liberal. Yeah, I think he is. And I think that another part I really like this part of his writings is that he pointed out that injustice of subject of women and the great suffering that women endure were so obvious. But unfortunately, for hundreds of thousands of years, for so long time, most people, including the Chinese sages, great thinkers, seems even not to notice them, which he said was incredibly strange and unthinkable. So he said all great Asian Chinese thinkers who taught people about benevolence, that's Ren, right, and righteousness and Yi, had overlooked the suffering of the half of the total population and the injustice done to the women, but only concerned with happiness and the interests of man. So yeah, China have a lot of great sage, great philosopher. And then he also criticized the religions. He talked about all kind of great religion. It seems they don't acknowledge women's suffering. And most religion also support inequality between the men and the women. And so that is really very, very sad. Not only philosophers, great sage, also, and all these religions, the religious figure, simply kind of don't care about the women's situation. So he feels that's incredibly strange and unthinkable, but it's the truth. It's just that's what really there. And so it's about this, you can see he criticized almost everybody, but then he said that he feels like nobody speak for the women, but at least at that time, I think in Britain, and Johnson Mill already published a subject on women. He really spoke for women. And that's, I'm not sure Kang read his book or not, maybe he did, but he maybe not. But rarely great philosopher, great religion leader really look at women's suffering and show sympathy. But Kang really point out that he feel very sad and he feel he should have the permission to speak out for the women. So he also noticed that women have been oppressed so long, so much, that people get used to and feel nothing wrong about it. Even women themselves in general accepted injustice on them, put up with the suffering, with question and complaints. They have regarded the way they've been treated as normal and take their suffering as their unchangeable fate. And definitely furthermore, man's doctrination has made women believe if they didn't live the way they are, they would be morally bad. And the men not only have made women obey to them, also justify their oppression in the moral and the legal term. So that's kind of, he feel like how bad the situation is. I think just a lot he said today still the case, definitely some already in the past. And it's something maybe still partially there, partially no longer. And but I saw just his description, his analysis of women's suffering, and is the kind of best I read in the modern Chinese philosophy there. So that's the one part I want to say. Another part, and I'm going to get his philosophical critique of sexual inequalities, why sexual equality is right, why sexual inequality is wrong. And first one is more kind of liberalism kind of criticism. And sexual inequality violates universal principle of equal human rights. By the way, here and in his time, and this kind of universal principle of human rights, equality, freedom, most people will regard as Western ideas. But he does not. He thinks that this universal values is not something just for the East and West. This is from West, that means it's Western value. And this value should be applied everywhere if that's universal value, like sexual equality and women's and men's, like men, women, all human beings equal rights, so on. He feel he is universalist. not Western like somebody support Westernization. So he insists this universal value, not about Western value. And so he argued that all the men and the women are born equal with equal natural rights. And it's unjust to slave the half of human population by another half. He feels very obvious, but the way people don't see it. And so he realized a lot of people say women don't deserve equal rights because women are inferior, women are not smart, women are unable, less capable than men. So he go to attack that issue, just as John Muir also did that in his book. And Kang argued men and women are similar in all physical and mental capacity, all aspects. Although there are small, light bodily difference between two sexes, for example, man generally is bigger and taller than women, but they are not significant enough to affect their common humanity and capacity. And actually, he can get some very good example talk about why people's size and does not matter. And then he used the man example as well. And he talked about in the ancient time in China, there are several men who are very short, very small, but they are turned out to brilliant prime minister and so on. So there he named several people there. That means the size is smaller, does not matter. So women is smaller than men. That means women is less able. He also taught the women themselves, like great scholar like the Ben Zhao and the great poet like Li Qingzhao. And he taught all these brilliant women, say they are really as able as men, if not better. And and he just want to say, look, and by nature, we are born, his word, we are all born from heaven, and we are all from nature, we are all equal, right? So we should have equal rights. So it's so wrong to treat women as less human, and even if women have the equal capacity in all aspects. But definitely he noticed that in reality, as a matter of fact, at his time, women in general less insightful, less open-minded than men, and less like achievement. But he emphasized this is not due to the defect in women's natural endowment, but caused by oppression of women that have greatly limited women's opportunity of education and life experience outside of home. Again, here is like the similarity between Kang Youwei and liberal feminism, like what Muir already said in his book. So another philosophical critique here, why women's oppression is wrong, because women's oppression causes great suffering of mankind. According to Kang Youwei, what promotes happiness or pleasure is morally right. What increases happiness or pain is morally wrong. And it is the only criterion by which to judge all the social institutions and moral documents. So that's why I said he is utilitarian in that sense. And he takes this as the criterion of morality. So, but why this should be the criterion of morality? He definitely influenced by the modern Western philosopher, believe all human beings by nature pursue pleasure, avoid the pain. It is from this innate tendency of a human being that universal principle and value are inferred or concluded. So ultimately, the purpose of morality is to promote people's pleasure. What is pleasurable is what is good. So therefore, his kind of universal principle about morality is very like the greatest happiness principle held by utilitarianism. And definitely he never used the term like greatest happiness principle. But definitely you can see from his expression, you can see he totally agreed with that. He said, all ways and the means that the sage have followed and adopted simply aim to help people avoid the pain and get pleasure. There is nothing else as the way of sage. that I guess if there is a right way, if there's a way sage already given to us, that is utilitarian way. Although he criticized the sage already to say you don't really see the women suffer. But if you go to the principle, what's morally right, and Kang Youwei believe the utilitarian principle about the pleasure and the pain, and that is only the way and the sages teach people. So right and wrong, and the way people should follow is to increase pleasure, decrease the pain. So given that, clearly, oppression of women make women suffer so much, we just mentioned early on. Women is half of human population. And women suffer so much, definitely they suffered already. Also, if you speak of total happiness and women suffer, definitely increase the total unhappiness of human being. So clearly, oppression of women is morally wrong. So that is from perspective of utilitarianism, although he never mentioned the word utilitarianism. So which I'm not sure if he read it or he didn't, but the principle clearly is totally in accordance with utilitarianism. If you look at the kind of the formulation of Johnson Mill and Benson about right and wrong, here's so much and overlap and about what is the only way we could judge right and wrong. So then he argued why sexual equality is good. So as we said already, that will increase the happiness, make the half of the population happier, make the total mankind happier. But also he talked about more beneficial result by a lot of women to engage in all profession, which will double number of the talent who will serve society. Again here, that's also overlap with the point in John Stuart Mill's book, subject of women. So when the women are given the opportunity equally, and their talent will serve society, so we get double number of the talents for mankind. So that will be great benefit for human being. So in his particular argument about and the benefit of sexual equality, he also talked about, which is not Western people already talk about, I get a typo here. And so the women's liberation also relates to the fate of China as a nation. And simply put it, if women live better and physically, mentally, and they will be more healthy, their children will be benefit, right? So women are healthy, will get more healthy baby. Women will, if women are morally and intellectually more developed, and by education, by equal political participation, their children will be better off morally and intellectually. And that will help China. And women's liberation will be indispensable part of China's survival and prosperity. So that is a very Chinese kind of talking here. So women's liberation is not just kind of ordinary just benefits, also concerned the fate of the nation. So as I mentioned, we already see the overlap between his idea and John Stuart Mill, and but that what's kind of merit here. And number one, I'm not sure if he really read the Mill's book, and there's no evidence, but maybe. And but even if he indeed adopt Mill's theoretical framework, his chapters, actually that whole volume, which I can consider a lot of chapters about women in his book of Great Unity, and still have a unique value. And for example, suffering of women that Kang talk about is much severe than what Mill talk about. And for Kang, women's suffering is mainly the matter of direct physical pain, abuse, hardship, or survival, or even death. And the Mill's book and talk more about unhappiness of women, and that is more about and weariness, disappointment, dissatisfaction with their life due to lack of opportunity and freedom, and to exercise their capacity. So in other words, and Kang Youwei talk more about like ordinary women struggle very hard to survive physically in developing country, and Mill talk more about middle class women who mainly suffer much psychologically in the West. And so I think just for that, Kang Youwei's liberating the suffering and status of women in a non-West country, especially in China, should be given a special place in the modern feminist philosophy. So this kind of really something really special in his writing. So I guess I have another 10 minutes, right? So lastly, and how we go to get sexual equality here. And so that as somebody who does not believe revolution, he believes the gradual evolution. And so sexual equality cannot be fully achieved before the age of universal peace, 太平世. That's the last stage of the human society. Anybody study his philosophy get at the 3 stages of the human development. So this is the last stage. Evolution from sexual inequality to sexual equality would be a very long process, especially in China, where women's oppression is severe, and then many other places. In a different age of human development, sexual equality could only be pursued to the degree that fit its special social context. So when eventually and the last stage come, and he will see that's the society in which intimate relation between the sex will be purely based on the love without marriage, and the man and women could be equal partner in sexual relationship, bound together by the temporary like renewable contract. It's like a year, then you decide if you want to continue or not. And so women will be completely free and independent. And so also, if you read his book of Great Unity, 大同书, and he actually emphasized sexual equality is of the fundamental importance for the ideal society. And for him, sexual equality is starting point of age of great peace, 太平世. And he said that people over the world want to reach great unity in the state of great peace. They must start with understanding sexual equality and independence, which are natural human rights. And actually in his book, he argued that and only their sexual equality, you can talk about abolish family, abolish private ownership, and abolish national bordering, and so on. And so then I didn't see that much argument, probably because his negative perception of family. He thinks if men and women be equal, they will not like to have so-called family. They will not agree to have a family. So when the men and women really equal, then family will disappear. So for him, the family is a part of a great source of human suffering. And then he didn't say a lot like the good things about the existing family. Even ideally could have good family, but unfortunately in the reality, and he didn't see there so much good things. So as long as the family exists, it will be impossible to eliminate private ownership. And that's another evil here, source of people's selfishness that has caused much suffering. So you get women and men's equality, you get abolish family and abolish private ownership, then you kind of abolish the border between the countries. Eventually you could really have the equality or something like that. So definitely for his ideal, when the ideal society comes, everybody is equal and no family, women will be totally just enjoying the life. There are no housework, even you don't need to cooking. And he talked about, and in the future, you don't need to cook. And also you don't have anybody to serve you because you get the very high technology. And like what we talk about, and somebody like just a machine to serve your food, and no waitress, no waiters, and something like that. And so the ideal society, and no one needed to be worried by the doing housework and family duty and so on, and all what the family really do will be taken care of by the society. And so that's the point that people could really be free. And so about that, like the connection between the private ownership and the women's liberation or people's equality, in somewhere I noticed get some overlap with Engels, but there are no evidence say he really read anything from him either. So did he accept historical materialism? Seems there are not clear evidence, but at least he think that, and there is a connection between economic development and the degree of women's liberation. And so for him, ideal society required a very high level of production and technology. And so that you get plenty of supply for everybody, and then we can talk about true equality. Then when that also comes, then we can talk about the high level of spirituality and the high level of morality. So it's not ideal here. He probably get partly from, let's say, the we call it utopian socialists, also Marxism. And so again, he mentioned like a Fourier and some already there. And but generally speaking, kind of there overlap with some like the socialist thinker there. I guess, let's see, should I finished already here? So anyway, just I think there are a lot of interesting ideas. I think maybe the ideas are too ideal to be true. And also maybe not all the ideas we really like no longer have any family and so on. And but there are something like really, I think that speaking of society's direction right now, we can see clearly less family, like the restriction, and that can give more freedom today, and also more technology, and especially applied to the housework, women get more freedom and so on. So I guess because of the time, and I will stop here, just to say I think, and even he's not totally right there in some point, especially his utopian society, but there's still something like really, he's really in the direction of the world trend, and that is towards sexual equality. So I think just maybe I have to just stop here. I maybe prepare too much here. So anyway, let me just stop here. It's almost an hour, right? Okay. So let me just skip off this. Okay. All right. Stop share. So I think just my presentation is just come to that much, and thank you so much. Let me just see if I can get that out. Okay. I could stop the share stuff. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This was an extremely stimulating presentation, and I'm sure there will be plenty of questions from the participants. So may I ask participants that are online if, because we cannot see the chat box from here, just please raise your virtual hand if you would like to ask a question. And here, yes, from this room, we have already some questions. Mimi?
Yes. Thank you very much for this very interesting and fascinating talk. Since I'm looking for another meeting, so I was a little bit rude to ask to have the privilege to ask the first question. And yeah, you are right. This topic is very much understudied, yet it's quite important. And since I have worked on Kang Youwei a little bit only on his classicism. Thank you. I worked only a little bit on Kang Youwei's classicism, so I'm not so sure about his standpoints or his opinions regarding equality of sexual equality and women rights. But I remember that I took a very quick look at his discussions on women's rights and also on the marriage system in the age of great peace. And I vaguely remember that what I read there is that he not only advocate of abolishing the marriage system and thinking that man and woman being together only for love, he also supports the love and the pleasure between man and woman. So at the same time, he also supports gay relationship, homosexual relationship. I'm not sure if I'm right here. So my question is my memory correct about this part? Thank you very much in advance for your response.
Thank you for your question. And I think I heard about that, but when I look at his reading, and I didn't see that evidence. But I definitely think he supports about pursue the pleasure for sure. But there are no the kind of clearly open to say he support the man and the women sexual activity. But definitely, I guess in a principle could be because he really support whatever increase the happiness, the pleasure, we should do it. But I think just at his time, maybe he even didn't really think about write about it. And his idea could be consistent with this. But I don't recall I read any passage he clearly said that. And but then it's very open. Even a man and women is not a marriage, right? So it's just kind of a contract, very short. And people like each other, they together. If they don't, they just separate. And because they're no family, no long-term relationship if they don't want to. So I will say what you ask, probably in principle he could endorse, but I'm not sure if he really actually talk about that. At least what is what I remember.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think maybe because the microphone is okay.
Thank you very much for the talk. It was really quite fascinating. And I think also very relevant here at the University of Macau. Here, it's quite a large university. And among all of our senior academics, which is everyone above associate professor level, only about 7% are women. So this is extraordinarily low in this institution, but it's rather bizarre because it seems as if all of the women that live perfectly or relatively free lives, we have a lot of autonomy, enjoy our jobs. So I'm sure this institution is not really all that unique, at least within China. So does that suggest that Kang's analysis, which focused on the family situation, was missing something important?
So could you repeat the last the you mean the questions about exactly?
Yes. So the situation in China today, judging by this university as a particular case, is one in which we have institutions which are deeply biased against women. Mm-hmm. So the example I gave was only 7% of the senior academics here are women. Mm-hmm. So extraordinarily low figure. Yet the situation of women's lives in their families seems to be one of relative freedom. So what was Kang, this is the question part, was there something missing in Kang's analysis of what would bring about sexual equality? Because we certainly don't seem to have it now in China at the institutional level, at least if this university is anything to judge by.
Yeah, this floor I get really impressive. You get so many women here. I didn't see any other department of philosophy have so many women. And when I was at the beginning, start my teaching at the University of Redland, we get and like the at that time and the 2 women. For men, we pretty like already okay. It's not only 1 woman, right? So it's 2 women. So you get so many senior female professor. I feel it's really impressive. It's exceptional. It's not. I don't feel that's really representative situation. And if we talk about the university, for example, in China, look at how many so-called well-established philosophers are female. It's kind of very hard. So I went to a lot of conference, and they sometimes have like so-called the 主席台, the main stage, and the women rarely have that stage. And the people justification go to say because women are not doing as well as men as a philosopher, therefore they are not be the case speaker and they are not invited. And so my answer very often is that, okay, so number 1 probably is the case, but and that is, as Kang Youwei mentioned, if women is less like the less kind of established, is not because they are not capable, because the environment is not friendly. Number 2, I will say very often women are as capable as men, but they just undervalued. Therefore, they are not being invited. They are not be like given the opportunity as men did. So I think just like, but if for me, like I get your university the situation, I think academically it's kind of you get high achievement. I will say it's really extraordinary. At the same time, I'm not sure and how much, in a way, like then that's not what Kang talk about double burden issue, and I'm not sure you still have that. But I know in my university we still have that. Women had to do double work a lot. You had to do even better than the man, even in the teaching. I read some teaching evaluation, like the research about evaluation to say that when the student actually unintentionally, when they evaluate their professor, and they also have a double standard about who's teaching best. And so women, they lecture a lot, usually get a low evaluation because they're not supposed to lecture a lot. And so women, if they don't give as much care as the male, as much care as people think as a woman, they get a bad evaluation. But if men do the same, students don't care because women are supposed to be caring. So women shouldn't miss the office hour, but men could. And the women should be nice, but men shouldn't. That's not expected. So even in the professional stuff here, and the women still like I guess the double standard, but the moral code is still there. Not only moral code, also maybe about the merit. So I don't know if I can answer your question exactly, but I think even if we get the situation like as good as your department, but the situation still have a lot of issue there. And the Kang Youwei's analysis maybe is because it's go back over 100 years ago. And he maybe didn't imagine you get so many female professors at a high position. And that's very good. At the same time, I think the issue like double standard and women not be evaluated, kind of appreciated as the man still there. But probably not in your department. But I will say in many universities in China. I was in China, taught for a few years. I also come back very often. I still can feel that, especially in philosophy, and people and really don't give enough appreciation to the female professor in the philosophy. At some conference, I kind of feel lonely sometimes, not so many female there. But when I give the criticism, people also don't like me. Feel like you kind of, why you criticize our conference, right? So I don't know how much I answered you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have many other questions. May I also ask one question first?
Yeah, sure.
Otherwise, this time I don't think I will manage. So, yes, there are actually many topics I would like you to duel in, but because I selected this one, I was very intrigued by a line that was included in your presentation, where I think talking about Kang, you would say, only you would write the term man's indoctrination, that is the indoctrination by men on women on how to behave, right? This indoctrination. So my question is about what kind of sources of indoctrination men had at that time in China, at least from the perspective of Kang. Because I think this is very relevant to our times nowadays, where indoctrination comes in many forms. Now, in contemporary times, I mean, I just want to refer to the case of Italy, right? In Italy, there are many levels of indoctrination that teaches women how to behave. The biggest one that had a lot of weight in the past was religion, Catholic religion, and the figure of Mary, and the way in which she would sacrifice everything for the others, right? So sacrifice as the core feature of femininity, for example, being a martyr, being someone that put her life for the sake of the others, will be the core aspect of the indoctrination that was placed on women from religion. But nowadays, there are other stronger forms of indoctrination that comes from social media, the TV, movies, and even shows where you have a very, very popular figures, for example, the most popular female influencer, who presents femininity in relation to certain values, habits, and behaviors. So that's the kind of indoctrination we have nowadays. What kind of indoctrination had Kang in mind? What kind of forces?
Go back to the older time, like in Kang's time, 19th century. And I think just the Chinese situation, how to say this, and I first go to the general speaking, and both in Kang Youwei and Jiang Studemil, they talk about at the beginning, and again, that's one of their kind of opinion, which I'm not saying is absolutely right. At the beginning, when men really have physical advantage, that feel from very early stage of human development, maybe that's how started, but very soon to like really make their power state, and men use the legal measure and the moral measure. Like, so that's kind of like the dominate social, like the dominate moral code, dominate legal code. And it's not like today's the only medium, right? So it's more about you get a society which they have the dominant class, dominant sex. They set up what's right, what's legal. And actually, like I skip out the part in my presentation, I try and just save the time. So when the one party be dominant over another, and they set up in a way like what is morally right. And because men dominate, so the moral code in traditional China, that is the moral code set up by the man. For example, what I mentioned about women cannot marry second man, women don't have the relation with other men. And it's not something you today you see from TV, but you get that from government, from your family, from your clan, from the people around you. They all tell you this. And then in China, the family is very strong, and the clans are very strong, and they have like their moral code, and the government supports certain moral code. So Confucianism, I'm not saying original like Confucius was mentioned. So even them, they have some sexist idea, but but later become worse. And in the Han Dynasty, start from Han Wudi, the Emperor Wu, and Confucian become dominant state philosophy. And then there later even have official idea about like Sangang Wuchang means like, and wife should obey to husband, and the kind of the women after husband died, they even should obey to their son, and something like that's really in later Confucianism. So because that's a state ideology, it's kind of easy to spread, and in the state through the family, through a basic unit. Also, I think there another way is the imperial exam in China. And so you go to imperial exam for all men, and you have to get like a textbook and from Confucianism. And so there, if you read very carefully, like in Mencius, for example, he clearly talk about, and the women's virtue is obedience. And before you go to marry, the women will, the mother will teach you, and when you come to husband family, you should obey to your husband and so on. But for the man, they should be great, courageous, and so on. So what we recite very often about a great man. Actually, that's literally for the man in the original book of Mencius. So Confucian book is really read by so many. Suppose really right. So I think that indoctrinations could go so many ways: government, family, friends, or organization. Except they're not TV, not social media like today. But I think that's really so much there. And so women being, like, guess you can see clearly the man, if they get a second woman, third woman, they feel pleasant, they even glorious. But for women, if they and have something with another man, some of them could be a suicide, right? Who teach them to do that? Because that's society already tell them. They feel that's a bad woman.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another question here.
Yes.
Dimitra?
Yes, thank you very much for your lecture and also for the also for the stories you shared with us, your family stories. Thank you very much for that too. My question is actually related to Nevio's question in some way, because I'm wondering what would be, if it would be, how it happened that Kang Youwei's critique of what he read as oppressive practices of his time, how was that compatible with his allegiance to Confucianism? Was there a kind of inner conflict there for Kang? Or does this critique of these practices also comes with a critique, actually, of institutionalized Confucianism?
Yeah, that's a very good question too. So myself, that's only my opinion. I think for Kang Youwei, he need, he need claim to be Confucian in order to carry out his reform. And I'm not sure how sincere he is, but sincere part is he want to reform Confucianism, and he want to put his liberalism and socialism into Confucianism. It's like some new Confucian people today, and they want to get all the good things into new Confucianism. So the Kang Youwei, on the one hand, he sincerely want to reform Confucianism, make that more modern and more reasonable. On the other hand, I think he get his way to say he need and Confucianism to like organize his reform and to like unite his people. He thought Confucianism is the good channel and good tool to unite the nation. And he thought that religion in the West is very powerful and make a nation strong. China needs that too. And so what he go to do? He found out the Confucian maybe have the most power. So probably use Confucianism to unite the nation, to make more people united, and to help the state become stronger. So, but frankly speaking, in my heart, I really didn't regard him much Confucian if you read his stuff there. And I didn't feel like you can see how like fiercely. He criticized the moral code, which usually people classify as Confucianism, and how much he fought equality, freedom, and how much he supports utilitarian morality. Then again, here in the name of a sage, he claimed all the sages of China all believe utilitarianism, which is not true. And so he could, on the one hand, sincerely to reform Confucianism, make that consistent with liberalism, socialism, and utilitarianism. On the other hand, I think he have that agenda to use Confucianism to help his reform political agenda, also help his goal to unite the Chinese people.
Thank you very much.
We now have a question from a participant online, Fiona Fu. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Professor. I think your work contributes a lot to the equality between male and female. I also work on Kang Youwei, but not on the equality between male and female. I seem to have two questions. First one is philosophically, where is the foundation of Kang Youwei's views on equality between male and female, namely where his ideas came from? Because the book of Great Unity is written almost 2 decades later. Than his work called the Complete Book on the Veritable Order and Public Law, 实理公法全书. And in that book, he already expressed some similar ideas about the equality between male and female. And some scholars like Mao Haijian claim that in Kang's early decades and his works were not impacted by Western philosophy, but rather impacted by Confucian philosophy. So my question is, since Kang expressed his idea on equality between male and female much earlier, in almost the 1880s. So what do you think? The philosophical foundation of his ideas. Do you think it's really Confucianism? My second question is that, Kang Youwei promotes some evolutionary views, like the society will go from the age of disorder to the age of approaching peace, and finally to the age of universal peace. You already mentioned that the equality, according to Kang Youwei, the equality of male and female is supposed to achieve in the age of universal peace. But in real life, Kang Youwei, although he promoted that the male and female equality, himself married 6 girls, and one is the wife, and the other 5 is the concubine, Xiao Qie, and he even got married with one when he was 62. So somebody including Kang Youwei himself will say that he did that is because China was not in the age of the universal peace. Since the equality belongs to the universal peace, and currently we still live in the age of disorder, 聚乱世. So what's supposed to be achieved in the age of universal peace cannot achieved here. But for me, it seems like be execute for Kang Youwei to freely do everything he wants. So how do we understand such this country this country behaviors? Why can't we say that what he said is just empty talk? That's my question.
Okay, it's a lot of questions. And so maybe I just answer your last one first, and we go back to theoretical source. So yes, and because I think just in my PowerPoint, actually I get the part about he talked about and about China itself, about what we should do. So on the principle, he strongly support sexual equality at his time, in principle. But at the same time, he thought Chinese women were not ready. And so if we just suddenly give women all the equality in China, we will get chaos. That's also what he said. And so he will say that's our goal for equality between men and women. That's the noble goal. That's what we are going to have. At the same time, he said it's not ready yet. It's not right now. And so if you just giving people what they are not ready, you get a worse consequence. Again, this is paralyzed to his political idea. He for democracy and freedom, equality. At the same time, he against revolution, right? And he think in China at that time, the only constitutional monarchy is correct. When the revolution already happened, he still have the same idea. That's why so many people criticize him. But his idea about the idea, democracy, freedom, equality is not changed. It's just when what we do. So for women's equality, also he get a similar idea about in China that he, on the one hand, really giving the critique. At the same time, he don't feel it's ready. Also, maybe as a part, he didn't publish his work. And from the research we get here, and the book is ready much earlier than when published, right? So he kind of, I think Liang Qichao argue finished around 1903 or something like that. But he didn't publish. And before he died, he published 2 chapters only, 2 volumes only, but not the one for the women. And so that's in the middle of 1930, after he died for a few years already, his whole book published. So get an idea, but he feel maybe not it's better not to publish, not that people have the idea, but he get a very good critique there. So then it's true, he didn't feel China was ready at that time for his own individual behavior. And I think he's not the only one who didn't practice what he in heart truly believed. He probably even feels good benefit for this woman who love him. And he also feels free love. He didn't force anybody. He hates that force people to marry him, but he found this woman really love him. And so that's maybe partly he didn't feel he violated his principle about free love. But he actually, I read his idea. He didn't really talk so much about one wife, one husband issue. He didn't really talk that much. And so it seems maybe it didn't really value his example about free love at all. He feel, even if he thought probably in the practice, you don't have all the philosopher really live up his ideal. I think like if you think about the Hu Shi himself, and Hu Shi is really very liberal, right? But about the marriage, about the love, he's very conservative. So that's why people talk about he know what free love is, but he just couldn't. He needed to stick to his marriage and arrange by his mother for life, right? So that's just but the way he did, people will admire him to say, oh, how good he is. And because we all have empathy, sympathy for his wife. Then we can go to criticize Kang Youwei to say, oh, how bad he is. He gets so many women. But in a way, like the kind of, they don't exactly practice their principle. But I guess we just prefer somebody who don't divorce their wife, right? We don't like somebody married to many women. So that's maybe one of the things you want to know about the source of his philosophy. If you look at his biography, and he started reading Western book a lot very early. He actually read a lot Western book, and before he published so much. And when he was in Japan, also he read a lot. Japanese have much more translation of Western philosophy than we have, than Chinese had. And so he did have a lot of Western philosophy book. And so also if you go to talk about kind of his book, which 实力公理, right? So that's really talk a lot about, he used the geometry method to write the book. It's not a Chinese way, right? He really get a lot of influence from Western science. So also he emphasized all of this idea is universal. He didn't want to say it's Western, because he found this really great idea is belong to humankind, not West. How about Confucianism? What I found in Confucianism, I actually I didn't have time to mention actually myself. I have the one paper about Confucian universalism. And so in the Confucianism, there is a kind of ingredient which support universalism, universal principle, like in Neo Confucianism, for example, in Zhuxi, for example. And I think that part has some influence on Kang Youwei, which help him to believe what is universal is really truth. It's not belong to particular nation, particular culture. So that is in Confucianism already. It's just a content, I think, get more from Western philosophy. So there is a Confucian universalism plus liberal universalism, but he put the liberal value much more there. So I don't think that in Confucianism really talks so much about equality, freedom, and kind of individual right. It's not really there. No matter how much we talk about like measures and so on, and talk about their respect for the people, it's not the democracy. It's still about a ruler are most important. You have to get a ruler educated, you get a ruler who's virtuous, then they love their children, they love their people. So it's not equality. Yes, there's a moral equality in Confucianism, but it's not a political equality. For Confucianism, they also have hierarchy. And for the leaders, if they're good ones, they're like good father. If they're bad ones, they are not bad, they are quite bad parents, right? So it's a parents-children relationship, it's not citizen and their environment. So that's particular content is not in Confucian, but universalism is in Confucianism.
Thank you very much. Xinyan, I am afraid that we are already running out of time. So it's already, yes, we still have 2 minutes though, if there are other questions, but we need to keep it short. But if you don't have you have short questions.
Yeah, just a short question on the abolishing family. Does Kang really reject that there is no fun in family, that there is only suffering in playing a role in a family? Because it seems like a very big claim that family is just too bad. Because you know, my mother, my grandma, they are excellent, and I think they found pleasure in raising us. So yeah.
Yeah, that idea I think is not his alone, and you can see the Marxism and utopian socialists is all there, and Kang Youwei has that idea as well. And as I said, like number one, his utopian idea maybe is not feasible. Number two, even it's feasible, maybe not everybody like it, right? So some people
do like it, right?
Yeah, some people maybe prefer family, right? But then he see that it's a burden. He actually, if you read his like the chapter about the family, he talk about actually and the Chinese family, and when people are together live like as big family, there are much more pain than happiness. But people will not tell people, right? So it's kind of, and the family for him is a burden. He thought most people will get rid of the family. And but I think that he will. I kind of read something about Mao Zedong's like the reading, and he kind of really like Kang Youwei in a sense, and kind of like remember like what happened in China in 1950, Da Yaojing there, great lead, and it seems that kind of idea, some people will say get rid of family, but you still have a relationship, right? It's still much better there. You get a relation, but without any burden of the family. But then it's really good for the children, for example. And Kang Youwei's idea is like when children was born, given to society until they're 18 years old, finish like all the school and go to college, then finish, then go to work until retirement. Everybody just no relationship, kind of cold there. So I kind of agree with you. I'm not sure it's all desirable, but it's also depends what do we mean by the family. And Engels didn't say totally no family, just will say no family like what we have today. At least nothing had family will have nothing to do with the economic situation. So, and if the man and women be together, that is a temporary family, is okay for Kang Youwei. But what we understand the family maybe is not okay because it's too much burden. So maybe he saw too much the bad side of a family. But I can say for somebody want to like the individuality, freedom, and he kind of make sense why family in a way like, I guess a lot of Chinese maybe have experience. We care some family so much and then we don't have the time to do all what we want. And it's a burden sometimes, but sometimes it's a joy. But that's a good question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm afraid now is really time to end this meeting. Xinyan, thank you again for having accepted our invitation.
Well, thank you for having me.
We had a very interesting discussion. So it was, your talk was very intriguing to all of us. Thank you very much. And I guess it's very late over there, right? So you're going to bed. Are you?
It's 11, yeah, 11
Ah,
p.m.
yeah.
Good night.
So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Richest thing. So good, just kind of the way it's always the reactionary. Something that was not totally relevant.
Because before, yes.
Okay, there's.
Everything
Why so many men nowadays?
So we will.
Okay, so then, also just across like performance.
At
There
4,
was fun playing
remember
of doing.
where is the room for the meeting?
Third floor, I guess. There is some fun,
Here.
role play, like a challenge.
Okay, if I finish, you can illustrate. Have a look.
And also just. Yeah, so they're willingly to go to the other side. I mean, there was something.
Gary, Gary, can you kindly close the meeting? Close the meeting on Zoom.
That's my thought. There must be some fun in it.